Welcome back. Now, abandoned and hijacked buildings in the Buffalo City Metro Municipality are compromising the safety of residents and businesses. Police and municipal officials say criminals use these neglected properties to carry out their illicit activities. Joining us now to unpack how this Eastern Cape Metro aims to crack down on the situation is Buffalo City Metro Municipality spokesperson Samkelo Ngwenya. Samkelo, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, hijacked buildings always tend to bring about problems. How big of a problem are these abandoned buildings that have become hijacked in your municipality?
Well, it's an issue for concern for us. We've seen what ends up with this building in other cities if they don't get attention. In terms of our wards, these are mainly concentrated around the Eastern CBD area. This is where we tend to have most of our universities and most buildings being run as residences. Hence, we find that those are the concentrated wards, which is about 4 to 5 wards out of the 50. But because of the number, it makes it a huge problem for us.
Now, I believe there are some 20 cases being investigated of these hijacked buildings. Can you tell us a little bit more about these cases and the investigations?
Well, we've got a responsibility to implement the bylaw, and the bylaw is very clear of what we must do when we find out the building has been abandoned. There are also interested groups in the metro, like the Center for Human Rights, that actually also sometimes even do take us to court. But for us, once we've done an investigation into a building, we then have to go to court, get a court order, and try and locate the owner. That normally is a process, because sometimes it's very difficult to do that. So far, in the cases that are in the court roll, all those 20 obtained court orders, and we now are following up on those owners, and we've managed to reduce some of these cases. They're very close to completion, and we're in the process of also taking over some of the buildings where we are having no success in terms of tracing who the owners are.
And just staying on the owners, Samkelo, the ones you have been able to track down, what are some of the reasons that they have abandoned these buildings? Surely they must be aware by abandoning these buildings they pose a risk to the residents of the city as well as those businesses as well. Do you get a sense that they get the sense of the repercussions of their actions of abandoning those buildings? What are the reasons for that, and what are the repercussions for abandoning a building?
Well, it's the nature of, I suppose, the Eastern Cape, because you find some people actually leave the province for greener pastures, and they leave buildings to either relatives and those get neglected. At times, people run into financial problems and they end up not maintaining the building. But what we also find is that we also get a situation where the estate is not being trained, people pass away, and you find there's a widow that is unable to do anything about the building. Those that we've tracked down will be able to try, because the law does allow us to give a person a bit of time, up to 90 days, to try and rectify the situation. But in most cases, people have just left the building because they can't do anything about it, or they've been taken over in terms of just pure neglect. So our aim is really not to take over the building, but to get the owners to actually come back and fix their buildings. But in most cases, it ends up us having to actually go the long road of actually taking over the building, because finding a person who's broke but has a building is not going to take us anywhere.
So then how do you then convince them to come back to those buildings that they abandoned because, for the reasons like you explained, that they perhaps couldn't afford to maintain it? Why would they then come back once it's been hijacked?
Well, give them a period of time. The 90 days, the court order will be specific on what is it that we want you to do in terms of the building, whether we want you to evict the tenants or fix the building. And from that, we then take action. We use as monies to fix that, to undertake evictions and do all that process. And then we'll invoice the person, and failing which we then have to take over the building, we might auction it or sell it off to actually try and recoup the money from the state. So ultimately, we have to ensure that the taxpayers' money is not wasted by people who are unable to maintain those buildings.
Now, you've also conducted raids in several of those old buildings in East London CBD, and you've discovered that slumlords are running some of those buildings. What have you done about that information that you've received during these raids about those slumlords?
Well, we've learned a few things. One of the things is the fact that, the challenges that are facing the country are affecting this building as well. So we find a lot of illegal immigrants, people running drug lords, and people running all sorts of things. And most of the time when we get to these buildings, no one wants to be an owner or take any responsibility. That's why we do these joint operations with the South African Police Service and the Immigration Services. So the first thing we do on these roads is to actually arrest any illegal activity that we find, because it's going to be a process to actually track down the ownership and take it from there. Then from that, we actually move upwards to actually track down who the owner is or who the person is renting from. And we are being assisted by community policing forums in terms of identifying this, but it's not easy to identify a building which is abandoned, because remember, Marcel, everyone has got their responsibility. So if a building is being neglected, it takes you a process to get into someone's yards and say, you are not maintaining this properly. You need a court order, in fact, to actually conduct a raid. And hence, we are keeping these raids secretively. We're doing them every week, and we're doing them in the odd hours of the morning so that we can actually catch people once they're in the act.
One can appreciate the efforts that are being made by the city, of course, to crack down on this problem. However, how did you as a municipality allow this problem to mushroom, then only do something about it when it's out of control? I think you've identified about 45 problem buildings that you call them. Why didn't you intervene before there were dozens of these kinds of problem buildings, before you actually intervene in the situation?
So the issue here is, before the building is hijacked, there's assumption is that the owner is actually in the building. So the list that we have of 45 buildings is the one that we think that they're in the process. So we have to investigate each and every one of those buildings. But one of the biggest challenges, just to answer closely your question, is the fact that the two wards, Southernwood and Quickly, have become university towns, and most of the buildings that are there are being converted into residences. So it becomes very difficult for us as government to be able to easily identify these. Hence, we have to work with community policing forums and rights organizations that are working with these. It helps us because at least we are able to identify these and we are able to take these to court. And now we are working with universities to know which building are they using as residences. So that's the main challenge, is the mushrooming of the residences in terms of these wards, and also the fact that they are university-oriented towns that are in these buildings.
Now, before I let you go, there are many complexities when you're trying to tackle this as well. You also made mention of different kinds of civil rights groups who also take you to court when you try and intervene in such situations as well. Of course, the issue of not being able to find some of these building owners too. What are some of the other challenges that you're facing when you're trying to tackle this problem?
Well, it's the fact that there's no paperwork. The building, even the person who's actually claiming to own the building is also claiming that he found the building as it is. Some of the challenges is the fact that these are havens for crimes and criminals, and also, of course, they also can be turned into fires. Apart from the fact that they're an eyesore, especially if buildings are in areas where we would want to attract tourism. So there's a few challenges. Court processes take time. The fact that we have to get a court order to get into a building, the entire process in itself, but we're getting better. We're getting external legal services to actually try and fast track these processes. We're learning by building, and I think that we are on the right track. The fact that we are conducting raids every week means that at least we are now able to be saying, taking action, and hopefully it's not going to be a situation like this in the next few months.
Well, we hope so too. It also does sound like a bit of a lengthy process, so good luck to you with that. That was Samkelo Ngwenya, who speaks for the Buffalo City Metro Municipality.